Afternoon, welcome to episode 17 of the State of Politics. We are live. It's myself, as per usual, joined by Patrick McGilp, and we're just going to be having a wee catch up with all the week's ongoings. COVID restrictions starting to move swiftly yesterday. We'll cover that. We'll cover the Batley Spain by-election, what that probably means now for George Galloway, for the Labour Party. Joe Cox's sister winning that seat, and we'll round up everything else. So we'll kick off probably, Patrick, best to start yesterday. Sanjay Javid's news, just if nobody's maybe, I'm sure folk all know the 19th of July is the proposed date, but do you want to just give us a wee kind of round-up of what he said yesterday?
Is this the Prime Minister that's getting rid of all the masks and the restrictions?
But the PM said yesterday, and then
Yes.
Sanjay Javid today.
Aye. It's definitely been a mixed response. I mean, obviously it only counts for England, but what he basically said was that July the 19th, apart from some sort of minor restrictions, I think concerts are still limited in a certain way. But I mean, masks can go, social distancing inside and out can go, full capacity stadiums, the whole lot. It's back to normality. But I think the Chief Scientific Officer and Chief Medical Officer are both saying that it could be 100,000 cases a day by August and 100 deaths a day, which would be about 15,000 a year or something. So it's quite incredible that they're just sort of deciding to plough on with this without any sort of trepidation or without any sort of consideration for those 100 people a day that are going to die from this. Why not just give it a month or two to get everyone double dosed with a vaccine? But I think he's keen to sort of be the freedom-loving libertarian that he likes to see himself as, and open up Britain to the world and be the very first, sort of keep pace with America, keep pace with all the other freedom-loving right-wing countries in the world.
Yeah, we probably think that it's becoming more and more political now that, in terms of politicians, they're only limited in their capacity of what they know and understand about data and advice that they're given. As you say, the two chief medical officers have been saying that, masks and stuff, just to try and minimalise cases if it can, to wait until those vaccines catch up. And it just seems as if Boris is wanting to politicise this now, just so he can be the man that says everything's going to get lifted, and it will be lifted.
Yeah, I mean, people are obviously excited because we've been in this for 16 months now. But I think Keir Starmer was actually right to say last night that it is reckless, because it's so many people. Because when you think of cases, people will have lesser symptoms because of the vaccine, but you still have people who have long COVID who are absolutely floored by it despite having both doses. So I don't think he's taken into consideration all the health aspects here. I think he's just sort of wanting to grab the headline, which he has, because the headlines all swing to his favour anyway. So I think it's very opportunist, and that's the type of character that he is.
Yeah, we'd spoken last week, we've spoken a lot about how Labour could capitalise on mistakes made by the government throughout this whole pandemic, but this seems to be that kind of springboard that I think he wants, in effect, to carry him through the next general election and to carry him through in this kind of bounce back proposed by the Tories, because to do this, and the language of it is very clear to say that this is what we're going to do, everything will go, and that will be us, and we'll pave the way and go forward. Whether as we know that is a deepening worry, because it's became now the reality admitted by both the Prime Minister and the First Minister, as well as the Welsh First Minister and everybody else, that we are going to need to learn to deal with COVID. We have a working vaccine. Theresa May stood up in Parliament only a couple of weeks ago saying there will be mutations, but it's a case of learning to deal with it. But it's important to stress that to deal with it, you need to have jabs and arms to deal with it. And by the point of the 19th of July, people aren't going to have that second dose, which surely can put us in a very dodgy position. Arthur Penny Fletch came in the comments saying he thinks another lockdown could be on the way, possibly in the winter.
Yeah, I think I've seen a few English commentators say that. The problem with the double dosing is the people who are testing positive, certainly in Scotland, I'm not entirely sure about England and Wales, but people who are testing positive in Scotland, the vast majority are under 44, and it's those under 44-year-olds that don't have their second dose, and that is why they are testing positive, because they're feeling the effects and going for a test. So what he's essentially doing is throwing younger people under the bus, but it's also younger people that are more desperate to get out, go to clubs, go to pubs, enjoy themselves, live their youth, So I think he's playing on that. He's playing on that excitement and sort of built up excitement, I suppose, for unlocking. When in actual fact, his job is to take care of the country, take care of the people, and he's not going to do that. He's just looking, as I said earlier, for the headline.
Yeah, and they've admitted that there will be deaths to COVID. It's going to be something that probably lives with us now forever. So it's how you can minimalise those deaths and how you can minimalise people actually getting the virus. And if it's something as simple and basic as putting a mask on to go on a bus or a train or whatever, it's just wise to do it. But to make it now at a point where it's not mandatory, I think is a real worry. You will still have probably elderly people will still maybe prefer to wear a mask. I know if I lived in England, I would still probably choose to wear a mask, especially in the winter time. You've been there like myself on trains, on buses, on the underground, and throughout winter there's always somebody on it with a cough or a runny nose that something probably will transmit. So in terms of actually cleanliness and good hygiene, surely a mask is just a small thing and a big part to play to try and just protect people.
Well, the statistic Joe Biden was sort of putting out there just after he won the election in November was that it can reduce transmission by up to 50%. So that's absolutely massive. When you're talking about numbers of hundreds of thousands, if you can split that in half just from wearing a mask, because a mask is nothing compared to the restrictions we've had to live under. I mean, the first lockdown 16 months ago, you were only allowed to leave the house for two reasons. That was to get essential food and medicine and go for your one exercise a day. So being able to sort of live life normally, plus wearing a mask in public transport in small spaces, it's a sacrifice I think almost everybody would be willing to make. What's interesting, I think, is the Chief Medical Officer and the Chief Scientific Advisor saying that in inside crowded spaces, they will continue to wear their mask despite it not being government advice. So I think there's a hint of disagreement between the politicians and the medical advisors there.
And surely those are the best placed people to give advice to move away from English restrictions to turn to Scotland. Now, we saw a sudden rise in cases after the Scotland-England game, which is blamed on Scotland fans basically going to Wembley. However, there has been a drop. It went to 4,000 at one point last week. I think today recorded over 2,000 cases in Scotland. Scottish Government are still saying that they're on track to lift restrictions or the dates that they've got. I'm just trying to get them up here.
The 19th of July and the 9th of August.
Yep, 19th of July. So that is on a review, and that is moving down to level 0. And is social distancing outdoors going to 0 metres, completely done away with, and indoors to 1 metre. Do you think this kind of slow approach is the best way forward to deal with this, and then see what the numbers are like once again just a week before? That'll be the 2nd of August before the 9th, and basically doing away with all restrictions.
We are basically sort of going halfway, going in 2 stages, whereas England are just got sort of going full pelt, drop all restrictions bar 1 or 2, whereas we go to level 0. You still can't have full capacity stadiums. I don't think you can have sort of stand-up gigs where you're all jumping about in a small confined space. Masks, I think, are going to be with us in Scotland for a long, long time, especially during the winter months. But yeah, I think the removal of social distancing outside, no matter what the number, is absolutely massive, because that opens up the possibility of things like transmit, where you've got thousands and thousands of people at a festival. Football stadia is technically outside, so there's a bit of a clash there where they're not allowing full capacity stadiums, but they're saying no social distancing outside. So it's a bit of a question mark over that. But I think it is the right approach just to sort of give it the extra 3 weeks.
Yeah, and I think the date of the 9th of August is indicative on over 40s being fully vaccinated. I think it's fully vaccinated by that time. Yeah, fully vaccinated. So again, it's to look at that. But again, there's been an opinion, Daniel's came in the comments there, of why rugby was given priority again over football. I think it's been poor the way football has been left behind at this. I know there was fans at Firhill just up the road from me last night, when I saw packed crowds at Wimbledon. Are you ever more increasingly confident, both you and I, as football fans, that by August time we will see full capacity stadiums return?
Well, that is the date. I think the controversy was, I think it might have been a pilot event, but in Murrayfield they had 23%, and in Tynecastle they only had about 3%. So I think people were quite annoyed, and they were saying, well, why is this? Why is it one for rugby fans and another for football fans? The reasoning is a pilot event, but then you could put it on the other foot and say, well, why isn't the football the pilot event?
Yeah.
You have like 2 or 3 rugby stadiums and over 40 football stadiums, and football is certainly, it might not, I don't know if it's a national sport, but there's certainly more following. I think there was a statistic just before the pandemic that about 2% of the Scottish population went to football grounds on a Saturday, and that's with every time Celtic play at home, Rangers play away, vice versa. If they were to both play at home, and then you have Hearts and Hibs as well, I think it'd be 3-4% possibly. So I think there needs to be more of a priority for football fans, and I think I've heard the arts say, and I think people, bands and gigs and all that are feeling mistreated. It's certainly a fragile environment and a difficult task for the government, and I think having such a big discrepancy with the rugby, the 23% to the 3%, even if it is a pilot event, I think is a bit of a slap in the face, to be honest.
Yeah, I think, when you think of normal citizens, you need to just look at how that looks, and it just doesn't look good on the face of it. And again, put every protocol in place, whether that's testing or whatever. But we'll see how that goes. I'm ever increasingly confident that we will get back to that. And again, like you said, if that social distancing is removed in July, music festivals can go ahead. But once again, I think it would be better for there to be, whether it be testing before you go along if you're going to be in a large scale event, or temperature on arrival. I don't know. It's not for me to make these rules up, but it's just something that I think would put a lot of people's minds at ease. But yeah, I think gigs as well is one of the big things that probably everybody misses. And again, they've not been able to do anything here at all. There's hardly been a pilot. I don't think there has been a pilot event gig in Scotland. So we'll just see what happens. A question on COVID is that if in one area a hospital goes to capacity on cases, what do you think is going to happen? Because that has been reported in the news. I think it's in the Highlands and Islands, and one hospital is at capacity on COVID cases at the moment. Do you think we could ever, if restrictions are lifted completely by that point, the 9th of August, will there still be that wee pullback that if an area is starting to become out of control, the government's going to step in, do you think?
I think it's a bit of a race against time, really, because I think if you were to have so many thousands of cases in Scotland, but if everyone was double vaccinated, I don't think they would need to go into hospital. You could have all these cases and either just sort of continue to live life, wear a mask, take a bit of precaution, maybe even self-isolate if you feel the need to. But it will be a very small number of people. It will be slightly worse than the flu, 3 or 4 times worse than the flu, I think it is, the effects of this. So I think once you get to 80 or 90% double vaccinated, I don't think hospitals will be overwhelmed. It's just whether or not we unlock too quickly that they become overwhelmed. I think, interestingly, that ties into yesterday was the 73rd birthday of one of the greatest institutions of this country, which is the National Health Service. Nye Bevan, 1948, July the 5th, introduces something that we still treasure to this day, and we can't imagine it without. I mean, could you imagine this pandemic without the National Health Service?
Well, you've seen how other countries have coped without a National Health Service and free healthcare.
America, who are distributing vaccines for free. But if you were seriously ill with COVID, I think you get a £100,000 bill from United Healthcare or whatever it is. and insurance only covers about 10 or 20% of that, and tissues and all that cost about £50. It's absolutely unbelievable. And I think what's also important to remember is the Conservatives, led by Winston Churchill, the war hero, voted against it over 20 times, which is, I think they are slowly getting rid of it now. I think they sold off about 39 GPs in England in the past couple of months, and I think they're planning on selling off about 70 more. So it is important that these institutions are protected. It was never going to be a case of, oh, the Tories are selling this off in one big go, like they did with British Gas, BT, the railways back in the 80s and 90s. It's such a loved institution that they would have to do it slowly and surely and defund it so it looks pathetic, and that actually privatising it would be an upgrade and would actually be better for people. But I think in reality, after this pandemic, that would take a lot of convincing for a lot of people, even Conservative voters in the south of England. I don't think would believe that. So, yes, happy birthday to the NHS.
Yep, happy birthday to the NHS. But on health, again, once restrictions are lifted and whatnot, the waiting list time is going to be absolutely incredible. And again, the backload that the NHS is going to need to get through across the United Kingdom is going to be a real hard task. And as you say, it's not time just now to do that because, as well as COVID, people are seriously ill with other ailments that they're not getting treated with. And not getting operations that they're due and whatnot. So it's a real hard time at this point in time. So to anybody, from the National Health Service is maybe tuning in, thank you for everything you're doing at this point in time. To move on to the by-election last week, back in Spain, a win for Labour. I'm sure Keir Starmer was very much so delighted at that because after his results only a matter of weeks ago, he was probably a bit worried going into it. But a win for Labour, and really nice to see. I think if you're on any side of the political divide, Jo Cox's sister winning the seat.
Yeah, 100%. I woke up shocked, I'll be totally honest. I thought the Tories had it wrapped up. I thought they'd won it by about 10 points, with George Galloway eating into the sort of typical Labour vote. They won it, I think, by 0.9% of the vote. George Galloway, it's hard to know where his base come from. I think people sort of assumed that it was the sort of large Muslim community in the constituency. But I mean, I don't think there's been any sort of research or polling into that.
He did get a lot of votes. I think he got about 9,000 votes, didn't he?
I get 8,000 and he got 21%, and he came third. But I don't think there's been any research into exactly who those voters were. It could have been right-wing nutters like himself. Obviously, the Tories get 34%. I think that's an increase on what they got in the 2019 election. I think what's interesting, what was pointed out to me the other day, was the Green Party stood down their candidate after a homophobia allegation. And I think if the Green Party were to stand, they would have taken votes off the Labour Party. And them standing down might have actually got Kim Ledbetter that seat. So I think that's quite interesting. It shows you how many different sort of factors are at play in these sort of small by-elections. And then, of course, you have the Matt Hancock scandal in the last 7 days. I'm sure that probably swung a few people. So very interesting, and a chance for Labour to sort of reboost. And they did that by announcing a new policy of investing in Britain, procuring sort of government supplies from British companies, which, whatever you think of Brexit, I think is a good thing, investing back into the sort of local economy.
Yeah, I think that is something that's really important. But again, those Galloway votes, we don't know if that was Labour voters who still kind of believed in George Galloway's politics in that sense, that were taking that vote away, which again builds into this idea of who is George Galloway and what does he represent, because the votes that he's probably likely to cut into are Labour votes who only a matter of years ago was telling us to vote Labour in general elections. So I don't get it with him. We've probably not seen the last of him yet. We go around in circles with George Galloway before. After the Scottish election, he would eventually disappear. He came back. He's lost again. Surely should just give it up now, pass it, and do some kind of TV talk show or something.
Well, he does have the mother of all talk shows on his Russia Today network.
Full time, I would much prefer rather than part time on that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one thing you do have to admire is the energy. I mean, I think he's 66 and he's campaigning for 6 weeks in the Scottish election and then straight into it in Batley and Spain. And I think he's putting his name forward for. Well, he did put his name forward for Rutherglen and Hamilton West for Margaret Ferrier. I don't think she's going to stand down. I think she's with us until the next general election, unfortunately.
Yep.
But George Galloway only cares about George Galloway, and I think he's only happy when he's speaking to a crowd and getting the cameras in his face and he's got a microphone in front of him. And I don't think people should really be indulging in that. And I think the Scottish election was a good example because I don't think he got the coverage that he would have wanted. I think he expected to make a bigger splash than what he did. So I can't actually see him going away anytime soon. I think he'll continue to stand in by-elections and elections. But yeah, he's become a bit of a joke figure and I can't see him winning an election anytime soon.
Yeah, I first came in the chat saying he's went off the rails. I think people who probably used to stand by side with George Galloway in a lot of the different issues. This is a man that travelled to the Senate and, put in one of the most miraculous performances, a brilliant orator. But at this point in time, wow, it's a complete turnaround in political ideology from him.
100%, 100%. I think he was a friend of Tony Benn at one point. He railed against the Iraq War. He opposed Thatcher every step of the way. He represented the people of, I think it was in your old constituency, was it Glasgow Hill Head? He used to represent?
Hill Head, which I don't know if that fell under my old constituency, but that is who he represented. Yeah,
took it off Roy Jenkins of the Social Democratic Party in 1987. So I certainly a character of back in the day, but the last 15 years or so have been absolutely out of this world. The transformation, the fact that he's campaigning as a pro-conservative candidate, pro-union candidate for a Boris Johnson government in April, and then standing as a socialist opposed to Keir Starmer's leadership in June it's incredible, and it's not credible, and people I think have seen through him. People seen through him a long time ago.
Dan just get rid of the comments saying George Galloway does it for attention these days. If you are watching, come in with another comments as well as that. If you can, please subscribe to the State of Mind page. We've got some great giveaways coming up, so be sure to retweet that if you're on Twitter and subscribe to the page. I think the first one that Paul put up today was a cracking Verve framed CD type thing that looked very nice on anybody's wall. So if you are watching, please make sure you subscribe to A State of Mind on YouTube, and if you'd give us a retweet on Twitter, that'd be grand. So, what else do you want to chat about today?
Well, you've got the very interesting phenomenon of exploding oil. What would you call it? Exploratory pipelines or something. I mean, the first one was absolutely crazy in the Gulf of Mexico, the state-owned oil company. It looked as if the end of the world. Donald Rumsfeld died a few days earlier, and it was like the gates of hell opening up to accept him. It was absolutely phenomenal in a spectacle way. It looked like something out of a Marvel Studios movie or something.
It didn't look real, but it's very, very real. And anybody who is still in denial of climate change, needs to think, and take a look, because we are at a point where we've had warnings for years now. Nobody's listened, and I think it's been great. I don't know if you've noticed at Glasgow Cross, it's projected up onto the big tower there. How long we've got left to sort ourselves out?
Which I think is 6 years.
Yep, it's a very stark reminder, and it is, in many ways, it's good that the government in this country are in a formal agreement with the Green Party, who, if anybody knows anything about climate change, they are surely the party to be working alongside to see if we can implement policies which can help us ever so slowly out of this mess that we've created. Because I was with David Tayman last night, actor David Tayman, who came away with a really good line in saying that, we've borrowed the world off our children, and, we need to give it back. And he doesn't want to be, saying to people, here it is, it's a heap of crap. So I think it's very important for people to take notice to climate change at this point in time.
Yeah, and it wasn't just one oil line that exploded. I think there was one, or maybe even two. I know there was three explosions. I think one was off the coast of Spain, and there was another third one. Yeah, I can't quite remember the location. And you also had a summit. I'm not entirely sure what it was called, but Nicola Sturgeon was there, and she gave a speech about how Scotland's targets were world leading. That is true. And I think she was followed by Greta Thunberg,
Mm.
who said that governments aren't doing enough, which is also true. It's
Mhm.
true to say that Scotland is a world leader, but it's also true to say that they're not doing enough from what the scientists are telling us
Mm.
to save the world in time. Because I think that post that you seen was actually Strathclyde University's Instagram post saying that we've got about 6.5 years left,
Mhm.
whereas the net zero target for the Scottish Government is 14 years away.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they certainly need to. I hope the Greens can be a positive influence in their targets, that's for sure. And it's slightly worrying that we are 7 years behind the cut-off point and we are one of the
Mm.
world leaders. I think China is 2049 or something. It's it's a serious worry, and hopefully they can all step up their action and their targets over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think the Scottish Government, one of the big criticisms of the Scottish Government is they might be world leading in setting the targets, but the targets are constantly missed. And that has been something not just happening recently, for years now. So you can only hope that the Greens are that positive influence and that formal agreement that can work, to implement policies that do have positive effects in people's lives and a positive effect in the world that we live in, and that we don't see videos like that. But we can only wait and see on that.
Yes. Well, we've certainly seen the floods in Edinburgh, and I think that
Mm.
is, these things happen even when there isn't climate change. But I think the fact that you're seeing these things more often, it's almost on a weekly basis. There's
Canada's another
Australian,
example.
exactly, yeah, Australian forest fires every single January. There was pictures, I think, a few months ago of California with a red sky. I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah, it's just things you don't expect to see and happen. Um, Another thing to move on to education. One of the announcements made today was that the bubbles are going to be scrapped in schools in England. This is that, as well as that, if you're double dosed by, I think it's August time in England, you won't have to isolate. In terms of education, we've had James McInerney in the programme. We spoke all about the structure of the SQA and the exam system. So that decision will be made before kids go back to school in August, whether or not there will be exams next year. What was your thoughts on this, Patrick? Do you think we should be looking to again go back to basically what we always did with exams, or learn from how we can test kids in a different way that basically gives them a greater chance of, getting that apprenticeship, college course, university course, or work?
I think there's nothing wrong with exams. I just think having them all in such a finite and small period of time, I think they all take place in the space of 6 weeks between April and June. And to have, I know maths is 100% in the final exam. Other departments have varying degrees going down to the final exam. And I know certain students perform better under time conditions,
Mm.
but I don't think it's a modern way of testing someone's knowledge. It's more a test of your memory than your knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
because you're remembering the key points and the essay structures that the SQA want to see, as opposed to the essay structures that would look good in, say, freelance journalism or research, things like that. So I think 4 or 5 tests, possibly under time conditions, throughout the course of the year to test different topics as you go would be a better measure of how kids do in school. So I hope that we eventually move to that sort of model. Obviously, cutting class sizes would help everyone dramatically as well, but that seems to be promised by everyone and delivered by no one in British politics. But yeah, I mean, I think James put it well just over a month ago. It does need a reform in the education system.
Yeah, it does, and I think as we learned with COVID, that word that we've used so many times, we've heard it on here, the attainment gap. We can talk about it as much as we like. We can throw money at it, but it's about finding what the basic foundations of why that exists and addressing that point. and that's why Marcus Rashford's been a total beacon of light, the past few months. Obviously, we hope his team don't do too well tomorrow evening against Denmark. But in terms of what he did for, providing people who, can't get a school meal and are going hungry, not just in terms of the food. Parents not, fuel poverty is absolutely massive. Parents not being able to cook stuff and maybe not only able to give them a kind of cold tin of beans or a packet of crisps or something for their dinner. So I think it's about addressing the foundations of why that exists, but we're not going to get to it quickly. There's no way of quickly solving the attainment gap. But I think, as you say, a restructuring of the SQA in terms of, trying to give kids that wee bit extra of a boost. Oh, Patrick's disappeared. I'll just continue on that point. The attainment gap is something that we're seeing so much, and it's all very good talking about it. But unless we invest money in it properly, we aren't going to solve it. I think we've got him back.
It likes
Twice
to do
that's
that.
happened.
That's 2 weeks in a row. It's incredible.
Dodgy messages coming through on your phone earlier on too. I think you need to sort yourself out. Yeah, I was just finishing on there the attainment gap that it's not going to be a quick fix, is it?
No, not at all. And I think, everyone knows that when you're hungry, you can't concentrate. So how's a child going to concentrate on stuff that they're learning for the first time if they're going hungry? So the free school meals is sensational, what he's doing. Breakfast clubs and all that. Cutting class sizes so you get more one-on-one time with a teacher helps massively. We do have the solutions. It's just a matter of implementing them and whether governments want to implement them. Obviously, it takes time, but I think steps need to be made and made quickly.
Yeah, steps do need to be made quickly. But again, the attitude towards school meals, it's not a priority of the UK government at this point in time, which is so, awful to look at when we're quite happy to spend billions of pounds on Trident nuclear missiles, but yet, in terms of when it comes to the attainment gap and kids going hungry, it's not the priority, is it?
No, not at all. Not at all. What is the priority of the UK government is passing the Policing and Crime Bill, which passed stage 3 last night, which I think bans peaceful protest or makes certain peaceful protests illegal. I think you've seen the Covert Spies Bill, which allowed police officers and covert police all sorts of powers to strike up false relationships, get away with, I think, literal murder if the reasoning was good enough. So there's a authoritarian creep coming in England and I think Wales as well. Luckily not in Scotland. But these things spread and they've totally bulldozed the powers of the Scottish Parliament with the Internal Market Bill as well, where they basically control how the government spends money, what it spends money on, and it can sort of what's the word? Overrule the Scottish Parliament and the Welsh Parliament and the Northern Irish Assembly, the laws that they pass, and this appears to be more important to the likes of Priti Patel and Boris Johnson than hungry children.
We were talking about priorities of UK government again. Voter fraud. Now, it's not something that is a major issue in this country across Scotland and across the rest of the UK. But yet, again, we're seeing a law come into place which is going to make it mandatory for ID when we go to the polling stations. Is this just a case of trying to even bridge? Not at all bridge. Just expand the class divide so much that, in terms of when people are going to vote, it's hard enough sometimes encouraging people to vote. Never mind if they don't have ID, which a lot of people, who don't come from wealthy backgrounds don't have. They don't have passports, so they don't drive a car, so they don't have any ID that they can use.
You've hit the nail on the head. Who doesn't have ID? It's young people who haven't get round to getting a passport or a provisional driver's licence. It's people who can't afford to go on holiday. Mm-hmm. Why would they get a passport if you can't afford to go on holiday? People who don't drive. I think every single rich person, wealthy person, middle class person will have a driver's licence. If you're struggling,
they'll have a provisional or some sort of thing.
Yeah. If you're struggling day to day, week to week, trying to make ends meet, trying to keep the meter on, trying to stock the fridge, trying to buy school uniforms, you're not going to be worrying about voting or a provisional driver's licence or a passport for you, your husband, and maybe one or two of your children. It's to sort of lock people out of democracy, not permanently, because they can ultimately buy identification, but it's a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. Meanwhile, there are all these social ills and problems that do actually exist that they're not really interested in addressing because they genuinely don't care.
Yeah, in the comments, we've also got a point saying it's to reduce the turnout, and that possibly is one of the things that they're wanting to do because, you know, as I say, in terms of, we're breaking it down to social class, it is those people from a less affluent background who will be less likely to turn out and vote. Where we're on the Conservative Party, we saw that the PM standing outside his home in number 10, on top of a massive England flag. Had it been Scotland or Wales, Northern Ireland in the tournament had got to this stage, could you have envisaged the Prime Minister doing that?
Absolutely not, but I also couldn't envisage Scotland getting to a semi-final. So I suppose
This is true.
I suppose it's fair game. But then again, Wales did get to the semi-final in 2016, and I don't think David Cameron or Theresa May ordered a Welsh flag.
No.
So it's just another stunt. It's another photo opportunity, a PR opportunity. I can't imagine him standing on a Scotland flag. Not that anyone who proudly displays a Scotland flag would want Boris Johnson standing on one in 10 Downing Street. I mean, you're sort of lost for words as to why he's done it, who it's appealing to. We are told that there is no money for people with disabilities, people who are starving, fixing and keeping open libraries, fixing schools, police stations. 20,000 police cut over the last 11 years. There's no money for this, but there's plenty of money for an England flag, because there always is.
Daniel in the comments said it would have been a Union Jack if it was Scotland in the semi-final. Probably would have been. But again, I found it quite humorous that some people was just saying he was being patriotic and all this stuff. But yet, you know, when some Scottish people try and be patriotic, they're dressed up as nationalists. So what is the difference exactly?
There isn't really one, funnily enough. I mean, I don't think either of them are complementary terms. I wouldn't consider myself a patriot or a nationalist, I suppose. I'm certainly not driven by a flag or anything. Obviously, Scotland's a flag in my country. If I was to go to a Scotland game, I might carry one along with me, but it's not something I would sort of display in my home or anything like that. I think I saw a tweet from a Labour supporter saying patriotism versus nationalism, and it was Keir Starmer in a pub with a pint and an England top, but Boris Johnson was the nationalist with the flag at Downing Street. And there isn't really a difference. They're both staged photos. They're both trying to tap into the English working class who like pints, who like football, who like going to the pub. It's just another one of these silly stories from Whitehall, from Westminster.
Yeah, and it just baffles you. It really does baffle you. You know, everything that's basically been on in the past week. Matt Hancock's basically just became a non-entity now. I've never really heard anything since that.
His career's over.
His career is over, but he is going to still be sitting on a back bench with his wages paid by British taxpayers, which is still a farce, but he's still going to be there. I know he never took his pay that he was meant to get because he was stepping down as a government minister. That was awful generous of him. But
not often you can say that about a Tory minister.
No, it's not. And, you know, even if he had taken it, you know, he could have used it for some positive change. But yet again, just disappearing, going to the shadows. And you know, but we've heard a lot of people saying we should be thankful to Matt Hancock. What would your reply be to that? I mean, there's been a lot of rhetoric coming out. You know, people have been saying about vaccines. I'm saying people loosely. The Prime Minister and his other peers have been going on and basically saying that we should be thankful for Matt Hancock.
Well, I think the first criticism would be the 128,000 excess deaths since the beginning of March. And the usual Tory reply to that would be that he's been trying his best and he's been doing his damnedest to reduce that, and that we should thank him for doing his best. But he hasn't actually been doing his best, because he's been given contracts not on merit, not to the person best suited to take those contracts, but to his mates who run the local pub, to his neighbours, to Tory donors. So he's not doing his best in that regard. And then he's not got his eye on the ball at work, because he's having these flings and these affairs. And I think that one caught on camera, not to cast aspersions, but probably isn't the first time a Tory minister has had an affair at a very crucial point in the nation's history, when there's a big decision to be made. So no, that would be my reply to people who say, Matt Hancock, we should be thankful. I don't think so. I think we should be thankful to the people who work in the NHS, who get a disgraceful 1% pay rise and a clap when they should have got the, whatever they wanted, really. I think the highest number I seen was the GMB union, 15%, which I wouldn't be opposed to that at all.
No, not at all. These are the kind of people we should be holding in high regard. Not football players. I know we mentioned Marcus Rashford's doing a lot of great work in that, but in terms of his role as a football player, it shouldn't be football players, musicians, whatever. It should be nurses and road sweepers and firefighters and people that really make a positive change and make people's lives that bit better and aren't on the best of money, but do things to make everything a bit better. Something we never chatted about last week, which I think is important to bring up, is Mr. Hancock's former colleague in the cabinet, Priti Patel, who on the front of the Times, this was last week, last week, I think it was last week, it was, had said that migrants, there was a plan to hold them in an offshore hub. When you think it can't get any better, it seriously can under the Tories, can't it?
Yeah, I think they're teaming up with Denmark, which is quite worrying, because the Danish Prime Minister is a young female Social Democrat, but she appears to be slightly racist as well, which is not something you often come across, certainly not in Scandinavia. I'm not sure. I know it was an African country, I think it was in the north of Africa, and I don't know how they would hold them there, because I don't think it's a British colony still. I'm sure it was at one point. But yeah,
there's not many countries in the world, Pat, that haven't been or tried to be invaded by the British Empire.
Either Britain, Spain, or France at some point. But it's absolutely gruesome. 5 or 10 years ago, you couldn't imagine something like that. But then people like Priti Patel come along, and I think you could wait a year or two, and I think she'll probably try and bring back capital punishment, and they've got the votes to do it. I think it would take a massive Tory rebellion for that not to pass, because I think they've got 7 DUP votes as well.
Mm-hmm.
And
they're very much in support of it too.
Oh, I bet they would be. I think the UUP would be up to it as well. I think the sort of effective majority, because Sinn Féin don't take their seats, there's a speaker, and there's 2 sort of people who call out the votes. The effective majority is actually only 321 or something, or 320. That's the threshold they need to reach.
Yep.
So you'd have to have over 40 or 50 Tory rebellions for something like this to fail. And I just can't see that happening.
And even again, if we go to another general election in a few years' time, there's still, a positive night last week for Labour, but we still see a massive split in the polls that just don't look like, they can overturn anything at this point in time.
Well, I seen one yesterday where they were 11 points behind, and one today with them 6 points behind. So even if you take the average of that, they're still 8 points behind. And after the 2 years that we've had, it's absolutely incredible. And I think with 8 points behind, because of how bad 2019 was, on a uniform swing, they would gain 20 or 30 seats. But 20 or 30 seats is no good, because you end up in a 2017 situation where the Tories can still effectively govern. So it'll take either a minor miracle or 2 general elections. And it's not worth waiting for, in mine and your opinion. One thing that was justice...
It's too long. It's far too long to wait, and by 100%. That time... that time, how many years will that be under Conservative info? 2010, so...
18 or 19, which
18 or 19 years.
If it's 2024 and 2029, it will be longer than Thatcher and Major.
And look at how much damage that did. to the UK, and even again, look what we replaced it with. Yeah, I know that Blair government brought in a lot of positive policies, but as well as that, it's completely put the party in its backside since.
Yeah, I mean, they had an unbelievably historic opportunity to reverse everything Thatcher done, and basically chose not to. They
Mm,
decided to. They funded the public sector by using private money, the PFI, Private Finance Initiative. They went to war, killed hundreds of thousands of innocent people needlessly. Um, Trade union rights were totally scattered under Thatcher. That wasn't reversed. The railway, uh, British Airways, British Telecom, I think British Gas, I think the post office was Cameron, in fairness. All these things were sold off, council houses as well, and Blair and Brown didn't do anything to
mm,
reverse that. They were
mm,
quite happy to just sort of go with the status quo and keep their friends in the city happy. And it was a wasted 13 years, in my opinion. And it's not worth staying for that again, to go through 20 years of austerity and then 10 or 12 years of mediocrity where you try and
mm.
please everybody, because it just doesn't work long term.
No.
One bit of good news was that a man who threatened Hamza Yousaf in November 2015 was finally sentenced. I don't think he's going to jail. I think he has to be sort of home with his tag, 7 o'clock
Right.
at night until 7 in the morning. But he said that Hamza Yousaf sided with Muslim killers the day after the Paris attack, which was pretty incredible. Pretty incredible statement to come out with. And then I think Cara Monaghan, a SNP MP from Glasgow, was threatened and had to be moved to a police safe house a few weeks ago.
Mm.
I think her sort of threatener has been sentenced as well. So it's good that justice has been done to these sort of right wing violent lunatics, especially with the Kim Ledbetter thing and her sister being murdered by a right wing neo Nazi lunatic. These attacks are totally unacceptable in modern politics.
Yeah, and we do live in a democracy. Yeah, we agree with a lot of things that other parties do, but we do believe in, people having the right to choose their vote. And but yeah, on the Labour Party, it's something that's one of the reasons, obviously, with Jerry Hassan on the podcast a few weeks ago, who'd spoke, a lot about the Labour Party, as well as Professor Sir John Curtis before that. And those years, Labour, especially here in Scotland, were in charge in both Westminster for a period, in Holyrood and in Kimpsall, and really, didn't do a lot to change people's lives in a very, very different manner. So it's probably one of the reasons why Scotland's fell out with Labour. Whether Scotland ever falls back in love with Labour, we don't know. And, to win a general election, either 2024 or 29, there's that phone of yours going again.
It's a terrible
It's a disaster, this from you. Total disaster. I need to sort it out. But
amateur.
it is 24 to 29, to probably get that win, they will need a bit of Scotland back. And at this point in time, can't see that happening.
Not necessarily. I mean, they need to win, I think, 100 seats in England
I
anyway.
think they do, though,
Uh,
Patrick. In terms of when you look at election history, I don't think that they would be able to gain enough momentum and support in England to get them to a very comfortable position to
well,
govern.
I think if you were sort of to delete Scotland from general elections in the past, the elections that Labour have won, they would have still have won with their
Mm,
English seats. Um, Whether that can be repeated, especially with the new boundary changes that are coming in, remains to be seen. But if you add up, I mean, I think we spoke about it last week, the SDLP, the Greens, the Plaid Cymru's, the SNP and the Labour Party, you're at 250 or 260 seats at the minute. So if
mhm.
you can get Labour to win 60 or 70 seats in England, you're there. You're at a progressive alliance.
It's going to be interesting to see, though, how they try and take back seats that they've lost in towns where, it was a real stronghold. How can they, you know, put themselves on the ticket as a party of change and a party of, more hope and somebody that will be positive to people's lives? Anything you want to say in closing?
There's an assisted dying bill going through the Scottish Parliament, which is welcome news, I think. I think it's probably going to take time because these things need the eyes of many lawyers to make sure there's no loopholes, there's nothing dangerous being passed, and it's done in the right way and in a humane way. Looking forward to that. I think we'll be one of the first in the world to pass something like that. I think Jeff Bezos, it's worth a mention, he's stepping down as the head of Amazon. He'll still own it, of course. He's still the world's richest man, but he stepped down as the man in charge. And there was a 4-day working week trialled in Iceland, which was hailed as a major success, and researchers encouraged the UK to follow suit. And I think if Jeremy Corbyn was Prime Minister, we would have followed suit already. It was heartening to see everyone apart from Douglas Ross endorse a potential trial of a 4-day working week and a universal basic income trial at the first Scottish leadership debate. I think that was in late March, early April. I think it's an idea that can be tested, because if you go back in history, people used to work 10-hour shifts 7 days a week. Trade unions and organisers and workers fought for the right to a weekend, fought for the right to a 48-hour week, and hopefully will be successful in the fight for a 4-day working week, because automation is taking over and there's no need for people to be worked into an early grave like they are in certain parts of America and Britain. So I think that's another positive. To end on a positive.
It's a positive as well when you look at, what we spoke earlier on about COVID bounce back. To give people that extra day off, or what it would probably be, to cut that working week from 4 to 5 days, and how that would likely benefit the economy. Because I think we are going to see a very different approach in terms of office spaces, especially from the past year that we've learned, that folk can work from the house at a laptop. So I think, in years to come, we won't see as many office spaces used. Yeah, that's going to have big effects on local shops, coffee shops, whatever. But as well as that, if you move to a 4-day working week, it's about striking the right balance there, because that's giving people that extra day to go out to, whether it be pubs, restaurants, or wherever, to meet up with people and meet friends. And I think would give another wee kick to the economy that it'll probably need post-COVID.
Well, what would happen is you would have people working 1 day less but still earning the same, and then in those missing hours, those missing days, you would have to employ more people to fill the gap. And in companies, like Amazon warehouses and Google and McDonald's and all these multinational, multi-billion-dollar, multi-trillion-dollar companies, it put more money in the hands of working people and create more jobs, and people would also have more free time to go and spend money into the economy and sort of help revitalise it after the COVID pandemic. So as the research shows, in certain states in America, in Japan and in Iceland, it's a positive thing, and it should be embraced.
Yep, it does work. The data shows it works. So I think it would be something that you and I would both like to see be embraced by government and actually give it a go. Thanks again to everybody who's tuned in today. Cheers to everybody that's commented. Again, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to A State of Mind on YouTube. As I said earlier on at the top of the show, there are some great prizes going out for all our subscribers. If you're on Twitter, give that a retweet. But all I've got to say is thanks to everybody again for joining in, and part of the chat. Hopefully we'll get back to our usual format with some good guests over the next few weeks during the summer months, and we'll be chatting about all different things. But as per usual, thanks from myself and Patrick McGilp for watching The State of Politics.